Hello all! Welcome to our third class. Today we're going to discuss the origins of criticism in classical music. We're also going to touch on early journals by composers versus the popular music journalism that took rise in the 1960s. We'll also examine the cultural history of music, how it fits into the wider social history, and how analysis through critical thought can help us deconstruct its deeper meaning and context. Let's get started. So, what is the difference between music journalism and music criticism? The Oxford Companion to Music defines music criticism as the intellectual activity of formulating judgments on the value and degree of excellence of individual works of music, or whole groups of genres. After increased interest in music and information media over the past century, the term has come to acquire the conventional meaning of journalistic reporting on musical performances. Today, music journalists report on music news, interview musicians, review albums and concerts, and write works of music criticism. Criticism now loosely represents one aspect of a larger role, that of the journalist. However, these two subjects were not always considered together. They were two separate things that came together through time and some cultural shifts. Let's move on to origins in classical music criticism. Writings about music can be found to date back to Plato's time in 4th century BC phenomenology and in medieval times through music theory evaluation. However, the first magazines specifically devoted to music criticism seem to have developed in Germany. The music criticism that more closely resembles what we recognize as music journalism today took root in the 18th century with the establishment of classical music journals. During the 1840s or the 19th century, music reportage was conducted strictly by esteemed music journals like Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung or the Neue Zeitschrift für Musik. Sorry, I don't speak German. But these were founded by Robert Schumann. And the Musical Times, founded in 1844 as the Musical Times and Singing Class Circular in London. At this point in time, it was unusual for music coverage to appear anywhere else other than a strictly musical publication. It was considered a central objective of general news publications to include the arts, but with the tremendous increase in musical interest during the Romantic era, because of artists that began to emphasize star status and flamboyant showmanship like Liszt and Paganini, it became common for writers that were not practicing musicians to write about music as well. Entering the 20th century, classical music criticism continued to be covered, while more vernacular or street-formulated styles like tin pan, vaudeville, and eventually jazz were covered only briefly, considering these new styles were not elevated enough to receive much coverage until later years by writers like Leonard Feather and John Hammond. So, let's go into popular music journalism, rock and beyond. It wasn't until around 1964, when the Beatles gained popularity, that writers started treating rock and pop music seriously. So how did we get from a Beatlemania that went without significant critical consideration in the daily press to an embattled mega business that attracts locally generated reviews and features today? And what about the first rock critic at a daily newspaper? Well, the locally beloved, nationally obscure Jane Scott, who was 45 on September 15, 1964, when she reviewed a Beatles concert, commencing a long, effusive career as the Cleveland Plain Dealer, was one of the first to step into rock critically. For many in the 50s, rock was just something for the kids to enjoy, but by the 60s, beginning with Richard Goldstein and the Village Voice, whose pop music column began in 1965, rock criticism was epidemic. Most important about this movement, and most remarkable, was that rock criticism embraced a dream or metaphor of perpetual revolution. Then came Paul Williams' Crawdaddy, Roberta Soma's Fusion, and Dave Marsh's Gonzo first-person aesthetic style magazine called Cream. You could see rock criticism in life with Albert Goldman, The New Yorker with Ellen Willis, Saturday Review with Ellen Sander, and Esquire with Robert Christgau. And of course, rock criticism was the backbone of the most successful magazine startup of the late 60s, Rolling Stone. Countering Rolling Stone at a lower level of profitability was previously mentioned magazine Cream, which soon lured Lester Bangs from his California home to Detroit, where he set a wildly irreverent tone that many others then and today try to emulate. The 80s brought the underground scene with punk and hip-hop and a pop explosion, and by the 1990s the major newspapers were regularly carrying reviews of popular music gigs and albums, which had a key role in keeping pop in the public eye. Previously mentioned critic Robert Christgau was the originator of the Consumer Guide, an approach to pop music reviews that helped audiences to decide whether to buy a new album, while the youth culture of rock criticism gave way to irreverent lifestyle reporting. By now, a synthesis of journalism, news reportage on the music industry and personalities, as well as standard criticism, was what people came to expect out of music journalism. But many other trends have emerged since the institution of online reportage, and with it comes endless possibilities to connect with musicians, writers, and readers alike on an intimate and often immediate level of connection to each other and the global culture of music. As we continue into our live discussion, I'd like you to consider a couple questions. First, Christgau from our first reading says that the newspapers joined the party late when it came to coverage of the music news, rock in particular. Do you think that newspapers underutilize this cultural phenomenon? How well do you think rock criticism and popular music journalism is covered in daily newspapers today? What do you think music journalism will look like in the age of online reporting, now and in the future? How is lifestyle reporting and music journalism changing the way we think about music? And lastly, what are some reporting trends that you've noticed in newspapers and music publications you read? And just one more thing before we go. Don't forget, your wild card number 1 writing is due. You're going to write a small piece, a short, about an event, a musical topic, song, album, or concert that interests you. And it can be anything we talked about today, as well as anything that we hadn't or even wanted to talk about. This is just a way for me to measure where you are with your writing ability. I look forward to reading everyone's initial work, so I'll see you all soon. Bye!